Welcome back to English in Fluency. I'm your host, Alex, and today we are doing something a little bit special. If you have ever found yourself listening to a conversation in English and thinking, wait, was that person giving advice just now? Or were they just making conversation? Then this episode is made for you. Seriously. This is one of those things that trips up so many learners, even people who already have a solid foundation in English. You can know all your vocabulary, you can get your grammar right, and you can still miss the moment when someone is gently nudging you toward a better choice. And that happens because advice in English, real advice between real people, doesn't always sound like advice. It sounds like something else. It sounds like curiosity. It sounds like a casual comment. It sounds like concern. And if you don't know what to listen for, it just flies right past you. So today, we are going to fix that. We are going to dig into the way English speakers actually express advice when they want to be gentle, when they don't want to sound bossy or rude, when they care about the other person's feelings. We're going to look at real conversations, real language, and we're going to train your ear so that next time you hear this kind of language, something clicks inside your head and you think, oh, I know what's happening here. That's the goal. That's what we're working toward today. Before we go any further, I just want to say something quickly. If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and it means more people like you get to find this content. And if you're listening as a podcast, leave us a review, share it with a friend who's learning English. Every little thing helps. Now, let's get into it. So let me start by painting you a picture. Imagine you have a friend. Let's call her Sophie. Sophie comes to you one afternoon and she looks a little tired. She sits down and says, I've just been so exhausted lately. I can't seem to shake this tiredness no matter what I do. Now, you care about Sophie. You want to help her. But you also don't want to come across like you're lecturing her or telling her what to do. So what do you say? You probably don't say, you must sleep more. You should eat better. You have to exercise. That sounds cold. That sounds bossy. It doesn't sound like a friend talking to a friend. Instead, you might say something like, have you tried going to bed a little earlier? Sometimes that makes a huge difference. Or maybe, it might be worth checking in with your doctor just to rule anything out. Or even just, I don't know, sometimes when I'm feeling that way, cutting back on caffeine actually helps. Might be different for you, of course. Do you hear the difference? All three of those responses are advice. Real, genuine, caring advice. But none of them sound harsh. None of them sound like commands. They're wrapped in something softer, something more human. And that wrapping, that gentle packaging, is exactly what we're going to unpack today. Phrase by phrase, conversation by conversation. Now, the first thing I want you to understand is why English speakers do this. Why go to all this trouble to soften advice? Why not just say what you think? The answer has everything to do with something called face. Not your physical face, but your social face. The idea that every person has a kind of image they want to protect in front of others. When someone gives you very direct advice, especially unsolicited advice, it can feel like an attack on that image. It can feel like the other person is saying, I know better than you. You've been doing it wrong. And even if that's not the intention at all, that's how it can land. So good communicators, people who are socially fluent, they find ways to share their thoughts while protecting the other person's dignity. And that's what gentle advice is all about. This is true in many cultures, but it is especially important to understand if you're learning English in a British, American, Canadian, or Australian context. In these cultures, there's a very strong social norm around not imposing on other people. You respect people's right to make their own choices. So even when you disagree, even when you can clearly see that someone's heading toward a mistake, you frame your advice in a way that says, "Here's an idea, but you're still the one in charge." That respect, that acknowledgement of the other person's autonomy, it comes through in the language. Let's start with the first group of gentle advice phrases, the ones built around questions. Questions are one of the most powerful tools for gentle advice because they don't impose anything. They open a door, but they let the other person decide whether to walk through it. Listen to these phrases and notice how they feel. Have you ever thought about trying a different approach? That's advice in the form of a question. The speaker isn't saying, "Try a different approach." They're saying, "Has this idea ever occurred to you?" It's much softer. It invites the listener to consider something without forcing them to. Did you ever consider talking to someone about it? Again, this is advice. The speaker thinks the other person should talk to someone. But instead of saying, "Talk to someone," they're asking if the idea has been considered. That's a huge difference in tone. Have you tried breaking it down into smaller steps? This one is full of genuine curiosity and care. It sounds like the speaker is interested, like they're thinking alongside the person, not above them. Now I want you to really feel the difference between these question-based phrases and the more direct versions. Direct. Talk to someone about it. Gentle. Did you ever consider talking to someone about it? Direct. Break it down into smaller steps. Gentle. Have you tried breaking it down into smaller steps? Same information. Completely different emotional texture. And this matters so much for your listening comprehension, because when you hear that question form, your brain might think, "Oh, they're just asking me something." But actually, they're gently nudging you toward an action. They're giving you advice. And if you miss that, you might miss a really important piece of the conversation. Now let's move to the second group of phrases, the ones that use conditionals. These are the if and might constructions, and they're everywhere in English advice giving. Here's what they look like. If I were you, I might try talking to your manager about it. This is a classic. If I were you is a signal that advice is coming. But notice it says might try, not would definitely do or must do. That word might softens everything. It's saying, here's what I could imagine doing, but you know your situation better than I do. It might be worth looking into. This is shorter, but it's doing the same thing. Might be worth is such a useful little phrase. It's not demanding. It's not even strongly recommending. It's just gently suggesting that something could have value. If you have time, it might help to write things down. Again, two softening tools in one sentence. If you have time shows respect for the person's schedule and autonomy. Might help keeps the advice tentative rather than certain. You might find it useful to speak to someone who's been through it. Here's might again, doing its work. The speaker thinks this would be useful, but they're presenting it as a possibility, not a certainty. Let's listen to a short conversation now. Take your time with it. Don't rush. Just listen for those gentle advice phrases and let them land naturally. Imagine two friends. One of them is named Marcus, and the other is Ellie. Marcus has just started a new job, and he's been feeling really overwhelmed. He's working long hours, he's not sleeping well, and he's starting to feel like he can't keep up. Marcus says, "I honestly don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I'm at the office until 9 or 10 every night, and then I come home and I still can't switch off. I just lie there staring at the ceiling." Ellie listens carefully. Then she says, "That sounds really draining. Have you thought about talking to your manager about your workload? Sometimes people don't even realize they're piling too much on someone until you actually say something." Marcus sighs. "I guess. I just don't want to seem like I can't handle it." Ellie nods. "I get that. I really do. But you know, it might be worth framing it differently. Instead of saying you're struggling, you could say you want to make sure you're prioritizing the right things. That way it sounds more like you're being proactive." Marcus thinks about this. "That's actually a good point." Ellie smiles. "And honestly, if I were you, I'd also try to set a hard stop time. Like, I'm leaving at 7 no matter what. Even if you don't get everything done, your brain needs time to decompress." Marcus nods slowly. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't really thought about it that way." Did you catch all the gentle advice in that conversation? Let's go back through it together. The first piece of advice came when Ellie said, "Have you thought about talking to your manager about your workload?" That's a question-based piece of advice. Ellie thinks Marcus should talk to his manager, but she's presenting it as an open question, not a command. Then she said, "It might be worth framing it differently." There's that phrase, "might be worth," again. Tentative, gentle, but still clearly a suggestion. Then she used a wonderful reframing, saying, "Instead of saying you're struggling, you could say you want to prioritize the right things." The phrase, "you could say," is another soft advice structure. Not "you should say," not "you must say," but "you could say." It opens a possibility without demanding anything. And finally, the classic, "If I were you, I'd also try to set a hard stop time." That "if I were you" structure we talked about earlier, right there in a real conversation. See how naturally all of that flows? None of it sounded pushy. All of it sounded warm and caring. And yet every single one of those moments was advice being given. That's what we mean when we talk about catching helpful language naturally. You don't have to strain for it. You just need to know what it sounds like. Let me take a short moment here to highlight something important about intonation, because this is a part of language learning that doesn't get enough attention. When English speakers give gentle advice, they often use a slightly softer, slower, more melodic tone of voice. The pitch comes down a little at the end of suggestions, making them sound less like questions and more like thoughtful comments. There's often a small pause before the advice comes, as if the speaker is thinking it through before they say it. And frequently, advice is preceded by acknowledgement. Listen for phrases like, "That sounds tough," or "I can see why you feel that way," or "That makes total sense." These are not just filler. They are signals that the speaker is about to say something meaningful. They're setting up the advice. They're saying, I hear you, and now here's what I'm thinking. So if you're ever in a listening situation and you hear someone acknowledge your feelings or your situation, pay attention. Advice is very often coming right after that. Now let's talk about another set of phrases. These are the ones that use words like maybe, perhaps, and just. These tiny little words pack a huge softening punch. Maybe you could try getting up a bit earlier. Perhaps it would help to write a list. You could just let him know how you're feeling. Do you see how just works there? You could let him know is already quite gentle. But you could just let him know is even softer. The word just minimizes the action, makes it seem small and easy, takes away the pressure. Just is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Maybe and perhaps work similarly. They signal that the speaker isn't certain, that this is one possibility among many. Maybe you could try getting up a bit earlier. Sounds like a tentative idea, not a firm recommendation. And that tentativeness, that humility from the speaker, makes the advice much easier to hear and accept. Let's do another listening exercise. This time, the scenario is a little different. Two colleagues at work. Their names are Priya and James. James has been struggling with a presentation he needs to give next week. He's not a very confident public speaker, and he's been avoiding working on it. James mentions it to Priya almost in passing. I've got that big presentation coming up on Thursday, and honestly, I haven't even started. I just keep putting it off. Priya tilts her head sympathetically. Presentations are stressful. I totally get it. Maybe you could just start with the outline. Like, don't think about the whole thing. Just get the main points down first. That usually makes it feel way less overwhelming. James looks a bit relieved. Yeah, I guess I keep thinking about the whole thing at once. Priya nods. Right. And that's exhausting. Perhaps it would also help to practice in front of someone. I'm happy to be your practice audience if that would make you feel better. James smiles. That's actually really kind. I might take you up on that. Priya adds, and one more thing, maybe just don't look at it as a performance. Think of it more like you're sharing something you know really well. You know the material. You just need to trust yourself. James exhales slowly. Okay. Yeah, that actually helps a lot. Thank you. Beautiful conversation, right? Let's pull out all the gentle advice. The first one. Maybe you could just start with the outline. Two softeners in one phrase. Maybe and just. James is being gently guided toward an action, but Priya's not telling him what he has to do. She's offering an idea. Second, perhaps it would also help to practice in front of someone. Perhaps, and would help. Soft and warm. Third, maybe just don't look at it as a performance. Another, maybe. Another, just. Short, light, but full of genuine wisdom. Notice also that Priya offered to help personally. I'm happy to be your practice audience if that would make you feel better. That's advice paired with a concrete offer of support. That combination, gentle suggestion plus personal offer, is incredibly common in warm, supportive English conversations. And it makes advice feel like an act of love rather than an act of judgment. Let's move forward now and talk about a slightly different type of gentle advice. This one is the experience sharing model. Instead of directly suggesting what someone else should do, the speaker talks about their own experience. When I was going through something similar, I found that just talking about it helped. Or, for me, making a list really made a difference. This approach is indirect in a beautiful way. The speaker isn't saying, "You should do this." They're saying, "This worked for me." And that leaves the other person completely free to decide whether it might work for them too. This kind of advice is extremely common and extremely powerful. It shows humility. The speaker isn't positioning themselves as an expert. They're just sharing their human experience. And that vulnerability, that openness, often makes the advice far more effective than any direct instruction would be. Watch how this plays out in another conversation. Two people, old friends catching up. Their names are Nadia and Tom. Nadia has been having a rough few months after a breakup, and she's been feeling really low. Tom listens as Nadia explains how she's been feeling. Isolated. A bit lost. Not really herself. Tom says gently, "I remember when I went through something similar, a few years back. I felt exactly the same way. Like everything had kind of lost its color, you know? What helped me, honestly, was just forcing myself to go outside every day. Even just for 20 minutes. It sounds almost too simple. But being around other people, even strangers, it really did something for me." Nadia looks thoughtful. I've been kind of hiding away, to be honest." Tom nods. "Yeah, I did that too. And I think it was making things worse without me realizing. I don't know. It might be worth trying. Just even a short walk around the block. See how you feel?" He pauses. "Also, and you don't have to take this on board at all, but when I was really struggling, talking to a counselor made a massive difference. I was kind of resistant to it at first, honestly. But once I started, I couldn't believe I'd waited so long." Nadia is quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I've thought about that actually." Tom smiles warmly. "Might be something to look into. Just something to consider." Let's notice a few things about that conversation. First, Tom used his own experience as the vehicle for the advice. "What helped me was," and "when I was really struggling." He wasn't pointing at Nadia and telling her what to do. He was walking alongside her and sharing what he'd learned from his own journey. Second, look at that phrase. "You don't have to take this on board at all." That's an explicit acknowledgement of the other person's autonomy. Tom is literally saying, "This is optional. I'm not pressuring you." And that kind of disclaimer, believe it or not, often makes people more open to the advice, not less. When you feel like you're not being pressured, you're more free to actually consider the idea. Third, that ending, "just something to consider," is perfect. It's so light. It says, "I've said my piece. I'm not going to push." And that lightness is incredibly respectful. Now I want to bring in a few more phrases that you'll hear often in advice-giving conversations, phrases that you might not immediately recognize as advice, but that absolutely are. "It's just a thought," but this is used to introduce an idea, while immediately signaling that it's not a strong demand. "It's just a thought, but maybe you could reach out to him and clear the air." The phrase, "it's just a thought," is almost self-deprecating. It's saying, "I'm not sure about this. Take it or leave it." And that lightness is the point. I could be wrong, but again, this is the speaker showing humility before offering their perspective. I could be wrong, but it seems like you might be putting too much pressure on yourself. When someone says, "I could be wrong," they're not really saying they think they're wrong. They're protecting the listener's dignity by acknowledging that the listener knows their own situation best. Have you ever considered the possibility that this is a longer, slightly more formal version of the question-based advice we talked about earlier? Have you ever considered the possibility that you're actually really good at this, and you just don't see it yet? That's advice. That's encouragement. But it's framed as a question about possibility, not a statement. What if you tried? This is casual, curious, and very effective. What if you tried going to bed at the same time every night? It has the energy of exploring together rather than instructing. It sounds collaborative. Let me take a moment to talk about something that can help you in real listening situations. Often, gentle advice is surrounded by specific conversational patterns. Understanding the pattern helps you recognize when advice is coming, even before you hear the actual phrases. Pattern 1 is the empathy advice sandwich. This is where the speaker starts with empathy, gives the advice in the middle, and ends with more warmth or reassurance. That sounds really hard. Have you thought about talking to someone? Either way, I'm here for you. The advice is sandwiched between two layers of care. If you hear someone open with empathy, be ready for advice to come next. Pattern 2 is the story bridge. This is where the speaker tells a brief personal story and then bridges from their story to a gentle suggestion for you. You know, I went through something similar, and what I found was that taking a break actually helped me think more clearly. It might be worth trying. The story creates connection, and then the advice flows naturally from it. Pattern 3 is the question pause suggestion pattern. This one is subtle but very common. The speaker asks a question, pauses, and listens to the answer, and then makes a gentle suggestion based on what they heard. The pause is important. It signals that the speaker is really listening, not just waiting to give their advice. The advice that comes after a genuine pause usually feels much more tailored and caring. Let's do one more full conversation. This one is a bit longer and a bit more emotionally layered. Two sisters. The older one is called Clara, and the younger one is called Mia. Mia has been working on a small business idea for the past year, but she's been stuck and not making the progress she hoped for. She's starting to wonder if she should give up. Mia calls Clara one evening and says, "I'm just not sure I can do this anymore. I've been at it for a year, and I feel like I'm going nowhere. Maybe I'm just not cut out for it." Clara takes a breath. She doesn't rush to respond. Then she says, "I can hear how tired you are, and I know how much you've put into this. That's a lot to carry." Mia says, "Yeah, I just feel like a failure." Clara says gently, "You're not a failure. You're someone who tried something really difficult. Those are two completely different things." She pauses. "Can I ask you something? When you say you're going nowhere, what does that actually mean to you? Like, what would progress look like?" Mia thinks. "I guess more customers, more income, actually making enough to pay myself." Clara says, "Okay, so those are pretty specific things. Have you tried breaking them down into smaller goals? Like, instead of thinking about all of it at once, what if you just focused on getting 3 new customers this month? Just 3. That's manageable, right?" Mia is quiet. "I never really thought about it that specifically," Clara continues. "It might also be worth talking to someone who's done this before. Not a coach or anything expensive if you can't afford it, but even just finding a community online, people who've built small businesses, and asking them questions. You'd be surprised how much people are willing to help. Mia says, "Yeah, I suppose I've been kind of doing this in isolation." Clara says, "And that's exhausting. You know, when I was trying to get my own project off the ground, that was the thing that saved me. Just having people around who understood what it felt like. I stopped feeling so alone with it." She pauses again. "I could be wrong, but I think part of the problem might be that you've been measuring yourself against where you thought you'd be, rather than where you started. And those are two really different measurements." Mia laughs a little. "You know, you might be right." Clara says warmly, "You've already done something most people never do. You started. That's not nothing. It's just a thought. But maybe give yourself another 3 months with a clearer plan before you make any big decisions. You might surprise yourself." Mia says softly, "Thank you. I really needed to hear that." That conversation is full of gentle advice, layered beautifully into genuine care. Let's trace through it. Clara started with empathy. "I can hear how tired you are. That's a lot to carry." She didn't jump straight to solutions. She acknowledged the feeling first. Then she asked a question to understand better. "When you say you're going nowhere, what does that actually mean to you?" This isn't just a clarifying question. It's a gentle way of helping Mia see her own situation more clearly. Often, asking the right question is itself a form of advice. Then came the suggestion. Have you tried breaking them down into smaller goals? What if you just focused on getting 3 new customers this month? Notice, have you tried? And what if? Both very soft, both very collaborative in energy. Then, it might also be worth talking to someone who's done this before. That phrase, "it might be worth," is a classic piece of gentle advice language. It's not urgent, it's not pushy, it's calm and thoughtful. Then Clara used the experience sharing model again. "When I was trying to get my own project off the ground, that was the thing that saved me." She drew on her own experience to normalize what Mia was feeling and point towards something that helped. Then, "I could be wrong, but I think part of the problem might be..." Two softeners stacked together. And then the advice was genuinely insightful, about measuring against origin rather than expectation. And the ending, "It's just a thought, but maybe give yourself another 3 months with a clearer plan." Light as air. The phrase, "it's just a thought," signals complete respect for Mia's autonomy. And then the actual advice is delivered in the gentlest possible way. That is how gentle advice works at its best. It's not just about the phrases, it's about the whole architecture of the conversation. Empathy first, questions to understand, advice in soft language, personal experience to connect, and always, always, a sense that the other person is free to choose. Now let me give you a quick guide to the phrases we've covered today. Think of these as a toolkit. Every time you're listening to English and you hear one of these, your mental flag should go up. Advice is being given right now. Have you thought about, is question-based advice very common, always gentle? Have you tried? Is similar, it's asking if the person has already explored this option, and it's another soft, open question. Did you ever consider, is slightly more formal, but the same structure. The speaker is wondering if an idea has occurred to you. What if you tried? Is casual and collaborative. It creates a sense of exploring together. Then the conditional phrases, if I were you, almost always signals that personal advice is coming, and the speaker is imaging themselves in your situation before giving it. It might be worth is wonderfully tentative. It says, this has potential value without demanding anything. It might help to is similar in structure and tone. You might find it useful to is slightly longer and a little more formal, but the meaning is the same. Then the experience sharing phrases. When I was going through something similar is a bridge from the speaker's experience to your situation. What helped me is direct but personal. The speaker isn't telling you what to do, they're sharing what worked for them. For me, the thing that made a difference is the same pattern, deeply personal and utterly non-pushy. And the humility markers, I could be wrong, but signals that what follows is an opinion, not a decree. It's just a thought, but is the speaker flagging that the idea is optional? You don't have to take this on board, but is an explicit statement of the listener's freedom to ignore the advice. Just something to consider is used at the end of a suggestion to signal that the speaker has finished and has no expectations about what you'll do with the idea. And the softening words themselves, the small but powerful ones, maybe, perhaps, just, might. When you hear these words in front of a suggestion, recognize them for what they are. They're tools of kindness. The speaker is working to protect your dignity while still sharing something they genuinely think could help you. There's one more thing I want to touch on before we close today, and that's the difference between advice giving and advice receiving in English. Because understanding how to listen to gentle advice is only half of the picture. The other half is understanding how people typically respond to it. When someone gives you gentle advice in English, there are certain phrases that are used to acknowledge and receive it. And knowing these phrases will help you understand when a conversational exchange about advice has just happened. Responses like, "That's actually a good point," or "I hadn't thought about it that way," or "Yeah, you might be right," or "I'll think about that," or "That's worth considering." These are all gracious ways of receiving advice. They don't mean the person will definitely follow the advice, but they signal that the advice has been heard and appreciated. When you hear these phrases in a conversation, you can be pretty confident that advice was just given and received. Contrast that with deflecting responses, things like, "Yeah, maybe," said quickly, without much thought, or "I've thought about that," in a way that closes the door. These signal that the advice wasn't quite landing, or the person wasn't quite ready for it. In those moments, a sensitive advice giver will usually back off, not push harder. And that backing off is also a form of respect. So as a listener, you're not just listening for the advice itself, you're listening for the whole dance, the offering, the receiving, the responding, the stepping back. All of that is part of the conversation, and all of it is meaningful. Let me give you one final short exercise to end today's episode. I'm going to describe a scenario and then give you a few sentences. I want you to listen and decide which ones are gentle advice and which ones are just casual conversation. Don't rush. Just listen with everything we've talked about today in mind. Scenario: two friends are talking. One of them, let's call her Beth, has been feeling anxious lately. She mentions it to her friend, whose name is Oliver. Sentence 1. "Oh, that sounds really tough." Is that advice? No. That's empathy. That's the setup. But it tells you advice might be coming. Sentence 2. Have you ever tried journaling? Some people find it really helpful for sorting through anxious thoughts. Is that advice? Yes. Have you ever tried is a soft, question-based advice structure. And some people find it helpful is a gentle, indirect endorsement of the idea. Sentence 3. The weather's been so unpredictable lately, hasn't it? Is that advice? No. That's a conversational detour, possibly to give Beth a moment to breathe. Sentence 4. I don't know. It might be worth thinking about what specifically triggers the anxiety. Sometimes just naming the thing makes it less powerful. Is that advice? Absolutely yes. It might be worth is our signal. And the second sentence elaborates on why, which is something advice givers often do. Sentence 5. Oh, we should grab coffee soon. Is that advice? No. That's an invitation, a gesture of friendship and connection. See how the advice-giving phrases stand out once you know what to listen for? They have a certain texture to them, a certain gentleness, a certain care, and once your ear is tuned to that texture, you'll catch it everywhere. In conversations, in films and TV shows, in podcasts, in the real world. And that's what English in Fluency is all about. Not just learning the rules, but training your ear to catch the language as it actually lives, as it breathes, as it moves between real people, in real moments. I want to say something before we wrap up today, because I think it's important. Learning a language isn't just a technical skill. It's a way of connecting with people. When you understand how someone is speaking to you, not just what the words mean on a surface level, but why they're choosing those words, you get something incredible. You get to actually be present in the conversation. You get to feel what the other person feels. You get to respond to what they really mean, not just what they literally said. And that's not a small thing. That's everything. That's what communication is. So keep listening. Keep coming back. Every episode, we're building that sensitivity together, that awareness, that fluency. Not just in grammar and vocabulary, but in the human texture of English, in the kindness and care and cleverness that's woven into the way people actually speak. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who's working on their English listening skills. It would mean the world to me, and it genuinely helps this channel grow so that we can keep making content like this. I'm Alex, this is English in Fluency, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.